From the drums to the yoinks, this chapter is peak One Piece and peak Luffy. Quite literally, he said so himself. Spoiler warnings for One Piece, chapter 1044. Hello everyone, it's Laffy Traffy. This is the single best chapter of One Piece I have read so far. Change my mind. And it's not just what happens in the chapter, it's the entire experience of anticipating it and reacting to it live and just laughing my ass off at the gags and just the over-animated nature that was Luffy in this chapter. It had me so unbelievably joyous that I still can't get over it. Now, I normally don't do individual reviews anymore, I usually just tack them on to the end of my reaction as a first impressions, but this chapter calls for an exception, rightfully so. There's a lot to talk about here and even more questions to ask, so let's get into it. If you enjoy weekly One Piece reactions and discussions, make sure you subscribe and also check me out on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram at Laffy Traffy for more One Piece anime and gaming content. Alright, so diving into this chapter, 1044 is a lot to take in, and we might not cover everything, but there is something that I do want to cover, even though it seems like a lot of people are kind of divided on whether or not it's an important scene, and that's Hiyori versus Orochi. But I think it's important that this scene is here in this particular chapter, and it's because it's the point of Wano. It's a great look at the big picture here, because the whole point of this entire arc in this raid on Onigashima is to free Wano. Free Wano from who? Kaido, but also Orochi. It's actually very fitting that both of the antagonists of this arc are meeting the climax of their respective ends. Kaido will now face a Joy Boy version of Luffy and presumably lose, and Orochi is now facing off against Hiyori and all of his past mistakes, and will lose. This also gives a huge spotlight to Oden. It's very important to remember the previous person, Oden, who fought against Kaido and Orochi's tyranny in the same chapter that the current person, Luffy, who will succeed in that wish, is getting an enormous buff and power up and is the chapter that makes you believe 100% that Luffy is going to win and free Wano. Still waiting on Denjiro to fight alongside Hiyori to defeat Orochi, and I think that their two ends, Kaido and Orochi's kind of being back to back, is fitting, and I know I also want Orochi dead and gone, and no matter how pathetic he is, second to Kaido, the main person responsible for everything that's happening on Wano, so to include him here is very important. But I just wanted to highlight that, because now we're gonna go over to the meat of the chapter, and that is Gear 5 Luffy. With Luffy's fruit being revealed not to be the Gum Gum fruit, he's actually the user of the mythical human fruit, model Nika, the sun god Nika, and there's a lot to talk about with that. Now, first of all, I want to talk about the awakening, because my theory this whole time was that Gear 5 was going to be the awakening. The awakening took on a very different outcome of what I thought it was going to be, yes, but it still makes a lot of sense that Gear 5 is the awakening. And I also enjoy that Luffy didn't awaken it willingly, necessarily, or he had been working on it in some way off screen. I like that it came out in the desperation of dying, and like many of Luffy's power-ups, it comes out in the heat of battle, so it makes a lot of sense that this is where we see Luffy's awakening, and it wasn't something that he consciously did, it just kind of happened to him. Now, the whole freedom of manipulation thing is crazy, because you can almost see panel from panel the way Luffy just transforms his body at will at a moment's notice. When he goes to grab the ground to block Kaido's attack, you see his hands enlarge in order to grab it, and then when he has to hold on to the ground to bounce back the Boro breath, he suddenly gets really thick arms as he gains muscle in this circumstance. You know, when he's swinging around Kaido, he does this, and he's like, yeah, I gotta power up, and just his biceps blow up. And of course how he enlarges his hand to a gear 3rd size to grab, to yoink Kaido out of the performance hall and up to the rooftop. It is just so fluid, and you can just feel the rubberiness coming from him. And it makes a lot of sense that the rubberiness was enhanced by this form. And speaking of yoinking Kaido right out of his living room, the whole cartoony style of this fight, of Kaido's eyes bulging out, of Luffy powering up, swinging him around. Kaido even has the dizziness icon over his head as he gets knocked on the head. It gives me the impression that it's more than just Oda being funny and, you know, doing a gag. I think it's actually the Devil Fruit creating cartoony styles in real life, because what's the ultimate freedom but freedom from reality? It's manipulating reality to just be more fun, to be a party, to make everyone laugh. And even though this is a very intense battle, you can clearly see that outside of battle, and the overall point of the fruit is to make people laugh and to make a great party and bring people together. And the fact that this is coming out in Kaido's fight, someone who is very serious and powerful and intimidating, to see him being swirled around as he has cartoon eyes bulging out of himself, it's so Luffy and it's so One Piece that I adore it so much. And it really kind of makes you think, like, what limits does this fruit have? The answer is only Luffy's imagination. So you and I can both just only imagine what Luffy can imagine, because that's gonna be what we're gonna see in the future of One Piece, is chaos. The restraints of realism don't hold true for this human mythical fruit. And that is the embodiment of freedom in every way. If Luffy needs to be stronger, he buffs up and becomes stronger. If Luffy needs to defend using the ground, then he just pulls up the ground and bounces the attack right back. You can see this overall Looney Tunes style fighting is such a unique but perfect power for Luffy that I am very excited to see this fight going forward, even more than I was before. The design of Gear 4th, Gear 5th, if I say Gear 4th sometimes, sorry, I keep saying Gear 4th instead of Gear 5th. The design of Gear 5th is really interesting as well, because I'll be honest, I was anime only at this point, but the reveal of Gear 4th was very strange to me. It was really goofy and I didn't like Gear 4th, but this one, this reveal, the way that we just saw bits and pieces of him, his hair, his flames, the abilities that he can do, all to reveal it in full with him just laughing his ass off. The design overall is amazing, with like the cloud harness that he has around himself and his fiery hair. That might be a power, that might be a Lunarian thing, some people are saying, with the swirly eyebrows, but I really think that the sun god Nika, the sun god, it would be kind of natural for that Devil Fruit user to have some properties of the sun, like flame. So maybe that's just kind of an accent to the Devil Fruit, is that he has flame powers, because we have seen that with Red Hawk, so that might all be tying together here. But I just love the constant laughter of Luffy as he's in this form. He's like, God, I was just beat to absolute shit. I think I died, but damn, am I having fun? And he's just laughing through the whole thing. He's laughing at Kaido. He's laughing at everything. And it is just such a wonderful chapter that I couldn't stop laughing myself. So in a meta way, the fruit worked on us. And talking about that kind of cloud harness, it's very familiar looking. It's very similar to what we see him in his Gear 4th forms, but it seems like he's kind of Peter Panning around, flying around in this Gear 5th form. So what if this is a method similar to how dragons fly, and maybe instead he can just float on the clouds around him because he's a god now? Why not? But with all of this, what does this mean for Luffy going forward? Because for one, I very, very much appreciate the fact that Luffy was not possessed by some reincarnation of Joy Boy, literally. And like I had theorized, the essence of the Devil Fruit awakening had just affected Luffy's voice in the way that Zunisha was able to recognize a awakened, well, I was gonna say Gum Gum Fruit, mythical Nika fruit. So that was what she was recognizing, not literally Joy Boy. It was just the essence and the familiar heartbeat and voice of Luffy now has kind of a shadow of the previous user of Joy Boy. Really, it just means that Luffy is still Luffy, and that's the one thing that I hope continues throughout the story, because we can assume that the fruit carrying the will of Nika has been eaten by multiple other people prior to Luffy, but it's not until the fruit is carried by someone like Luffy with the inherent ambition of freedom that the fruit can be taken to its next level. Luffy needs the fruit, perhaps, to fulfill his overall dream of being king of the pirates and freeing the world, but the fruit also needs Luffy to be able to take it to that next stage and allow the dawn to come. And that to me is a very important distinguishing factor, because this doesn't mean that Luffy is just being carried by the fruit. It means that it's a mutual thing, that they need each other. And that makes Luffy, being Luffy, who he is and the choices he makes, very, very important to the fruit's success. And this also means going forward that this opens up a grand possibility of future forms. Some, like kind of myself, were worried that if Luffy awakened here in Wano, then what more does he have later in the final battle against Blackbeard and the final war, if those are separate things, which they probably are? Where can Luffy continue to go if he awakens so early? But with this new form, the fact that it's actually a new devil fruit entirely kind of opens up the possibility of an entire new set of abilities and techniques that Luffy will now be able to journey through, as he now realizes that he doesn't just have the Gum Gum fruit, that he has a mythical human fruit. I don't know who's gonna be the one to tell him, but if he doesn't know already, then, well, that's just Luffy. This also opens up the possibility of a giant Luffy in the future, and I will have a video coming out with that and Elbath and Luffy's future development there, so make sure you subscribe so you'll get notified for that video in the coming few days, weeks, who knows. It will be out there. All I'm saying is that it's interesting that we get this new form of Luffy being able to freely manipulate his body to be larger, smaller, and whatever he needs, at the same time where the next island is going to be filled with giant warriors. And now this all comes down to all of the unanswered questions that we have, because while this did answer some and was a fantastic reveal, this really has only led to a billion questions. But here are some main ones that we can discuss, and make sure you leave your ideas down below, because I am interested in seeing what everyone's opinions on this is. But the first one that isn't too big of a deal, but I do want to discuss it, is whether or not the will of the fruit is the sun god Nika, or is it Joy Boy? Because if you really think about it, Joy Boy could have just been a person. Let's call him, I don't know, Binks, something completely random. Was Joy Boy just a person who ate the mythical Nika fruit? Or is it the case where Joy Boy and Nika were one and the same, because that's kind of the vibe we were getting, and maybe throughout the ages and just the legacy that it left, maybe they became a devil fruit? The will manifested into a devil fruit? We don't know how devil fruits are made. And with, you know, Baby Five's weapons fruit, it has to be something with reality that is altering what the powers of the fruit is, because weapons aren't natural. A lot of things of devil fruits aren't only natural, so how are devil fruits made? Joy Boy and Nika could have been some god that became a devil fruit. Who knows? My thoughts is, it is said that the devil fruit hasn't been awakened in 800 years, so that does indicate that Joy Boy was the user of the Nika fruit mythical zone. So it kind of lends more credence to that idea, but then in that case, who was Nika? And like, is that a god that still exists? We don't really know a lot about religion in the One Piece world, so that'd be an interesting idea to discuss. And now my biggest complaint here with this chapter is, what does this mean for Luffy's adventures thus far? Specifically, the beginning of it, because we have Shanks. And the big question with him I have is, would Shanks have sacrificed his arm to Luffy if Luffy had really just eaten a rubber paramecia fruit? And if the answer is no, how much did that change Shanks in your eyes? My perspective on it is I really don't want to say that Shanks wouldn't have bet on Luffy, because that was kind of the whole point, was Luffy was just some kid who lit a spark in Shanks's eye and reminded him of his former captain, and so he bet everything on him. Yes, Luffy did want to join Shanks's crew prior to eating the devil fruit, but interestingly, it wasn't until after he ate the devil fruit that Luffy changed his desires from joining Shanks's crew to starting a crew of his own, one that can rival Shanks and be his own thing. Coincidence? I think. Maybe. Unfortunately, there is a lot of evidence that suggests that Shanks wouldn't have bet on Luffy if it wasn't for this devil fruit, considering all the effort that Shanks put into finding it. You could maybe stretch it, pun intended, that maybe Shanks was waiting to find just someone to inherit that will and that devil fruit, and he was saving it, and if Luffy didn't just accidentally eat it at that time, maybe Luffy would have had time to impress Shanks, and Shanks may have chosen Luffy anyway, kind of pointing to the fact that Luffy was a good candidate. After the fact, maybe Shanks was like, well, this random kid just ate this really important devil fruit, but you know what? He's a good kid, and he has a lot of ambition, and he does remind me of Roger, and maybe he will be the one. I think he has what it takes. I think he has what it takes to change the world. So you know what? I'm gonna bet on him. I think he's a good choice. I do hope we get these answers when we finally meet Shanks and Luffy and Shanks have those interactions, and maybe we'll get Shanks' perspective there, and maybe Luffy will ask like, hey Shanks, did you just bet on me because of the devil fruit that I had? Maybe Luffy wouldn't be the one to ask this because asking important questions isn't really Luffy's forte, but maybe we can get Shanks' perspective on that if he's just blatantly asked. I do really want to know your perspective on this in particular because it's the one thing that's really holding me back from having 100% enjoyment out of this. It's like 99.5, but that 0.5 is like, is Shanks not what we originally expected? Is he different? Because I love Shanks, and I still do, but definitely makes you question some things, so let me know your thoughts. My next question that I need answered is, what did dying have to do with the awakening? Did it only happen because he died that it awakened, or was it just that Luffy was so desperate in the face of death that he awakened, and given the awakened fruit's properties of the imagination being the limit and absolute freedom of everything in reality, did the fruit just restart Luffy's heart, Eneru style? Did he just say, I need to win no matter what, and so he awakened the fruit through that desperation, and then the fruit, the awakened form, was like, okay, you're alive now, here's the drums of liberation, because there was a big emphasis on his heartbeat. So does that have to do with him dying, or is it just the awakened state? Basically, would Luffy have been able to awaken this fruit without dying, is the question. And finally, does this make sense? There is for sure a degree of suspension of disbelief here, and it's give or take whether or not that's a good writing point, because sometimes I'm angry about it and I'm like, no, this is stupid, I don't want to go there. But sometimes you can say that there is a level of suspension of disbelief in fictional stories with pirates with magical abilities, and you just kind of have to say like, yeah, that's cool, that's really, oh wow, cool. There are definitely moments of foreshadowing that you can point to in either way, because, Luffy should know what his fruit is, but Shanks, going out of his way to get this gum fruit, it's definitely suspicious. It seems like from the very first chapter, this devil fruit was different. There was something more to it. But there's definitely a bit of instances where it's like, nah, this is kind of retcon-y. This is the retcon fruit at this point, but okay, it's still really freaking cool, and it's okay if Oda hadn't planned this exact outcome 25 years ago. That's okay. I know it's controversial to say that, but it's okay. So we can have a little leeway here of what exactly the fruit was, and I don't think it's such an absurd reveal that you're like, no, this is stupid, doesn't make sense at all. I think it balances. It balances a bit of like making you think it, but also accepting it. But overall, those were all of the major points that I wanted to get out there. Again, I don't normally do reviews, and that's not going to be a consistent thing, but this chapter was something else, and I'm very excited for the next chapter. There is no break next week, so make sure you subscribe so you can see my reaction and review for the next chapter, and check me out on Twitch and Twitter and Instagram for more One Piece, gaming, and anime content. And until next time, have a great day, follow your dreams, and check me next time. Bye!